Hi, I'm Danny,
I'm Sam.
and this is in a Brew.
We'll be poring over business stories,
And talking about things that interest us in the world of business.
so we'd like you to just take a few minutes out, listen.
Yeah, we'd love it if you join our conversation with us.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. So, Daniel, this one's about, now you're a coffee drinker, are you?
No, I'm allergic to caffeine.
Yeah. I'm allergic to not having caffeine, I think, 'cause it makes me feel grotty if I don't have it in the morning. And I do like coffee. But this particular subject is about Starbucks. And actually, I really like Starbucks. You know, against Cafe Nero, for example, I prefer Starbucks.
But a lot of people have a big problem with big chains
They do. Big chains of anything, really.
in a sort of esoteric kind of way rather than a fact-based kind of way.
Quite right, yeah. But Starbucks is a very interesting case because on the one hand, there's its publicly perceived values, and then there's what's actually happening in reality. That kind of takes away some of the shine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been going since 1971. Very humble little tiny store. Starbucks. The name comes from a character in Moby Dick, which is my favourite story of all time. Starbuck was a harpooner.
Really? As in someone wielding a harpoon?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't the harpooner, was he?
No. Have I got that right? Am I questioning myself? I'm pretty sure he's a harpooner.
Well, if you're not, someone will insult you in the comments, so it's fine.
It will.
Don't worry. You'll be re-educated.
Yeah. It's just remembering that. Anyway, it's become incredibly successful. There's a huge drive for growth, and it's, from the public's perception, is based upon its values. And I love these values. I really do. And I'm just reading them from the website. When we show up at our best, we deliver performance through the lens of humanity, which I think is a blindingly brilliant sentence there. And
it's just fluff.
That may transpire during this. Through craft, courage, results, belonging, and joy. And every element breaks down into 3 different points. Anyone can go and find this on their website. Now, obviously, it is actually publicly owned, but owned by a lot of corporations as well. So there's a lot of investment that's gone into this. And when you've got public ownership, you've got the requirement to satisfy your shareholders.
Yes.
Which can bring along with that some issues. The board of any public company is answerable to its shareholders. The shareholders want their value. They want their money to work for them. They've invested in this company. They want return on that.
It's a business at the end of the day.
Absolutely. But sadly, in pursuit of this astronomical success, there's been a number of widely reported controversies relating to, I'll read them out: human rights, environmental damage, supply chain management. The company's obviously made efforts to improve its practices. These issues have raised concerns about that.
Sorry, out of curiosity, does it make an effort to improve the practices that come to light? Or generally, is it constantly making an effort to improve its practices?
Well, that's a question for them to answer, really. Because what I'm picking up, of course, is what is reported.
Yes.
At the other end, so reported by the media and certain action groups. But there's even activity from some shareholders, some activist shareholders, who are not particularly happy. They've perhaps invested.
So they invested because of the values.
Yeah.
But they're not actually happy with the reality behind it.
It's a company with values, but the reality is a little different. And the unpalatable side for me is that it's a lovely, friendly brand, but it has some darker aspects. So is this something we have to accept with all corporations? But corporations are, the way they're driven by shareholders, shareholder value, and the requirement, the fiduciary responsibility of a board to constantly improve on brand and reputation, but also to also return
on investment
and look after shareholders. That pursuit then, of course, then means there are certain things that inevitably end up being perhaps compromised.
Yeah.
Now, I'm in pursuit myself of profit as a small business owner, and I completely respect that. That's a requirement for every business to try and do that. But I also have to think about how I'm going to sleep at night if I were to do anything I perceive as I'm not really sure.
You mean that moral grey area?
Yes, yes. But of course, I don't have shareholders. Obviously I do myself and
people
my business partner.
Invested,
but I have
not
stakeholders who are my team, my clients, and my family. Really, that's it. Beyond that, no. So a corporation's management and leadership, board, and responsibilities to ensure that there's a legal and ethical obligation of the board members to act in the best interest of the company and its shareholders. And stakeholders, of course, at that end, certainly in Starbucks are, and most corporations, are employees, supply chain members, customers, the environment, community in which they operate, generally anyone or anything.
Well, they're massive machines, so they affect a lot of people.
So they have a community around them, every single place.
An ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a company not only has a responsibility to its shareholders, but of course its corporate and wider social responsibility as well. So beyond those immediate stakeholders as well. It's really one of those corporations that is forced by the very nature of what it does and its own operation and its ownership. It's forced to push for bigger and ever more, driving for profit and improving efficiency. So because it's so big, and again, along with a lot of corporations, agency problems come in, and agency theory pretty much is, whilst a corporation's intentions may be good, elements within the corporation's indirect control, which is when agency is given over to someone. Don't think about an agency, but think about how agency is.
So, like, the main cog can turn all the other cogs, but you can't necessarily guarantee exactly what that cog is doing, or how they're doing it,
without putting something in place to monitor that.
And it's almost impossible at that size to monitor all the little bits and pieces of the move. Yeah,
and it blurs the lines there. Therefore, creates a bit of opacity and an ability to see every aspect easily. Now they have vertical integration to all of their supply chain, which actually means that they should be able to control an awful lot of that.
But a little bit like we've talked about before with other things, you can't always control the man on the ground.
No.
You can put all the practices in place and all the values in place, but you still can't control one individual.
Absolutely, yeah. So just to get a kind of an understanding of just how big that is, so they've got 38,000 stores worldwide. There's over 38,000, 20,000 plus in North America, 17,000, nearly 18,000 internationally. This is as at last year.
I've never been in one.
Right. They've got 6 roasting centres, locations in Seattle, Shanghai, Milan, New York City, Tokyo and Chicago. They've got 24 co-manufacturers in the United States, Canada, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. A tea processing plant in Portland, Oregon. A 240-hectare coffee farm in Costa Rica that serves as a global research and development facility and working farm. 6 central storage facilities to help streamline logistics. They've got distribution partners through Nestle, PepsiCo, and Grubhub. A vertically integrated supply chain, as I mentioned, which means they're involved in every process from sourcing.
They've got a finger in every single pie in that process.
Yes, yeah.
Which is the way to bring costs down. If it's your supply chain, it's a lot easier to keep
maintain
the costs down.
that control. Yeah. But it doesn't stop there being issues. So how does the board oversee all of that? It's a huge task, no matter what they might say. So the problems that are occurring, these are readily available within the media, and these are not any opinion. I'm reporting here that there are labour conditions in the supply chain. So there's low wages, coffee farmers, low wages. They source much of their coffee from developing countries where labour conditions are poor often. They promote the commitment to ethical sourcing, like programs like the CAFE practices, coffee and farmer equity practices. It's faced criticism for not ensuring that farmers receive a living wage. Many coffee growers in countries, Ethiopia, Guatemala and others, they struggle with poverty in spite of claims for fair practices. There's child labour concerns, which is Africa and Latin America, as reported. They have policies in place against child labour, enforcement and monitoring. But actually doing that in remote regions... Well,
yeah, if you've outsourced to a factory, you don't know who they're employing.
Exactly. So you know the person's coming to check, so you're switching...
You're bringing your adults.
Just imagine. How can they see that? They can't.
That's no different to any other criminal enterprise when you flip over your gambling tables and make it look like you weren't running a speakeasy.
Yeah, but let's be clear. They're not running a criminal enterprise.
No, they're
running a legitimate enterprise, and they've got issues through the supply chain that they don't control, which is it's a terrible place to be, and I'm sure they can't be happy about it.
Oh no, but with a company of their size, they must have a degree of control.
Yes.
Surely the bigger person with the bigger voice.
You'd think so.
Has an influence.
They also have a bit of a reputation for employee treatment, or not so wholesome employee treatment, and union busting as well. We hear this quite a lot from corporations in America, in particular, which is unions are not almost recognised, and there's a dismissing union involvement and actually treating workers differently because they might have a union affiliation. Quite a few employees within Starbucks stores attempted to unionise, but the company had tried to retaliate on this by cutting their hours and terminating the contracts or closing unionised stores.
So weeding out anyone who was a dissenter.
Yeah. The issue itself in 2021-22 gained media attention because there were employees across the US that filed complaints with the National Labour Relations Board on the very matter. And then there are benefits, though. There's a give and a take here because giving is that they have healthcare for employees working 20 hours or more per week, but its hourly wages are being considered insufficient, particularly given the high cost of living in cities, which is where the majority of their stores are. But it goes on. Environmental damage, which coffee production by its nature
deforestation
has to take place in areas where the environment is robust enough.
Coffee suitable.
Exactly. So the deforestation part has come in Central and South America. So we see this on the news constantly. The rainforests being decimated. It's one of those crops, unfortunately, that takes water from the aquifer and takes the rainforest away to produce a crop for other parts of the world. But demand for coffee is growing. I feel guilty drinking my cup of coffee this morning. And there's a loss of biodiversity, which is, sort of leads to
there are fair trade coffees out there.
Soil erosion, but fair trade does not necessarily mean what it says it means.
Is that a different can of worms?
I think it is. It may be something that's covered in a later one, and a lot of single-use plastics and waste, a high carbon footprint and water usage, which I just alluded to. You can dig really deep on this, and then of course their own supply chain issues, which have been discussed so far. So there's a massive problem. There is a massive problem. How do you get a corporation of that size? Because we can actually use any particular corporation, and actually, what is it that allows a corporation to lose some of that control? They don't mean to do it clearly, but it's endemic within the operational system of any corporation.
And I get that.
I'd like to do a talk on one that actually does have it exactly right. And I think Patagonia might be one of those.
Yeah, I did. I looked at Patagonia as well. But it's difficult because I know values are important and I know that's what we want to connect with on a level. But realistically, these things are all happening. These things are all widely reportable. You could find them very easily. People are still shopping at Starbucks. You hear the same things with Primark and child labour. People are still shopping on Primark. People are still shopping on Shein.
There have been activists that have boycotted.
But at which point does this level of not living up to your values actually make a difference to a brand of this size? A small one, absolutely. People might stop buying your cupcakes from your local cupcake shop because you found out you use ground mouse in it. I really couldn't think of a really good example there, but never mind. But a company of this size, realistically, are they ever going to get touched by this level of controversy? I don't know.
Well, quite possibly.
I know.
All I see, I'm going to start to draw this to a close now, but all I see is that major global corporation, they've got a very good public view. They're under pressure to align their business practices with the public commitments. I mean, if you could somehow do that, they could be one of the best corporations on the planet.
I don't disagree, and I think there's a whole conversation about values to have. Because I do think values is such a buzzword that people think they need them, so they write the ones that sound good. Like that first sentence you read when I laughed at it, because it is just a bit fluffy. They think they need them, they write them, and then they actually couldn't care less about living up to them. At least Starbucks are trying, but they're not hitting the mark. But I just don't know.
I think I'm hoping that they are trying, and they will eventually get there. I really hope so, because I really like their coffee.
Oh, good. So as long as you're fine.
What I'd love to see is a focus on what's called the triple bottom line, which is people, planet, and profit, rather than profit at all costs. If they could, it's very easy for me to say my little tiny business, But I've done enough reading, research, and work on this to actually understand that is something we all should be aiming at. And any business owners out there that looking at the triple bottom line as opposed to just the bottom line might be something that could help you differentiate yourself, but actually enable you to sleep at night a little bit.
And talk about your values in a meaningful way that connect back to what you're actually doing, instead of it just being a nodding dog exercise of something you think you should have and talk about on social media. So it would be. Although I struggle to understand a balance sheet at the best of the time, so adding 2 extra bottom lines would be quite challenging.
Yeah, I know, but anyway, I like the idea of them becoming a leading light.
Yeah, and I think there are plenty of other companies who could learn from that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to go and get a coffee now.
Okay, enjoy. Thanks so much for listening and being a part of today's episode.
If you like what you've heard, or if you feel there's something missing, or you want to ask any questions, please get in contact.
And if you love listening to us as much as we love talking to you, subscribe, download, leave us a review. All the love helps.
Thank you.